also start looking at something where you were absolutely certain by having it or achieving it or getting it will bring you happiness. And start analyzing the flaws in that idea. Impermanence of getting that thing and what it does for you. Refocus and reset your intention to why you're here today. Think about all the people that you can affect and help. So that not only you, but they too can also reach an ultimate level of happiness. Dedicate your time here in the next 2 hours for all of that. When you're ready, open your eyes. How was that for everyone? Is that okay? That's good? Okay. I know in your homeworks there's an assignment of analytical meditations. And so we can turn the AC on too, I know it's hot. You can grab a cushion up here as well and move it back there if you need, or make yourself comfortable. And I wanted to just do a quick analytical meditation for those of you that have never done one. So basically, whenever you're doing an analytical meditation, it is doing analysis, and we kind of, actually, I should say, we absolutely do it every day in multiple ways. You know, it's like when you think about going to buy a pair of shoes, you know, you actually do an analysis of, well, is it the price point I want? Does it make sense to the outfit? Do I really need it? How badly do I need it? You know, is it the right color? Is it, you know, and you actually look at all these different ways of whether or not that pair of shoes is the right pair of shoes for your needs, right? You do the same way for jobs or for different decisions that you make. Should I call them? Should I not call them? Should I send that email now? Should I not, right? All those different things, you do an actual analysis and you weigh all the pros and cons and you look at it in a bunch of different ways. So when you're doing an analytical meditation in the spiritual context, you're doing pretty much the same thing, right? You can take the object and the focus in front of you and start looking at it in all the different ways. And I encourage you to take renunciation as one of your topics. And it can start very simple as just looking at it and asking yourself and looking at, what does it really mean to me? You know, what are the things I've learned? How does it make sense? Does it make sense? Where have I done it? How have I not been doing it? How much of my time is really spent looking at renunciation day to day, moment to moment? Where are there moments where I do feel like I've renunciated and understand the concept? And where are there moments where I really haven't? You know, where are there moments like today I was driving like parking, I'm like, if I had that parking spot, I'd be so much happier than that one over there, you know? Like, and knowing that, you know, like, parking a little bit farther down the street is not going to make that big of a difference. Although I'm convinced that I will, that it does, right? And so looking at renunciation constantly of where do you start grasping towards certain things, you know, where you think that that's going to actually fulfill you and make you happier or please you or satisfy you. Because it does, it's not to say it doesn't satisfy you momentarily, but the reason why we're here and why we're talking about what we've been talking about for the last, well, 2 classes and now the 3rd is we're trying to reach an ultimate level of satisfaction and happiness, right? So it's not this temporary thing. So I've been away for 3 weeks. Thank you so much for your patience. It's been, I can talk to some of you that have just joined us, but about what my trip has been about and what my team has done. We were in Malawi for 3 weeks. It was, I just came back yesterday, and I have to say it hasn't quite sunk in yet. It's the residuals are still, I'm not feeling, there are moments where it feels a little surreal. It's been, the hardest part has been, I'm in a country where, or we were in a country where there was power outages constantly. And I had presentations I was prepared to do, and I was working with these girls, and I'm like, we had, you know, plans and schedules, and it was so brilliant in so many ways, and then we'd get ready to go on, and then the power would go out, and every day the power would go out, and it just made me go crazy. So it was so funny because when I was getting ready to teach, I was starting to do this keynote, and I'm thinking, wait, what if the power goes out? And I'm like, oh, no, we don't know. There'll probably be power at the 3 joules. But my mind goes into, you know, when you don't have power, there was no internet, there was no water. You know, it was just, the country just becomes dead, and it was very frustrating. And it's been one of the best things I realized when we got to a major airport, because we missed our flight, actually, so we were stuck in Malawi for 2 extra days. And I was calling the airlines, and just saying, well, you know, are you at the airport? Can we talk to someone at the gate? I'm like, there is really no gate where we're at, you know. It's just a total mess. And when we flew through Johannesburg, and it was a major airport, and it was like so much electricity and so many lights, and it was amazing to just feel like, you know, you go to the bathroom and there's toilet paper, and it was the small things really, for this trip in particular, just really, I have so much gratitude towards. And I remember even going through customs at JFK, and it was so efficient, and I was so proud of like Americans, you know, of like they have their act together. But we had a long 3 weeks where we worked with girls and supporting, you know, I say girls' education, but it wasn't like teaching them how to read and write. It was really showing them and really looking at the value of who they were as beings, as women. And it was incredibly humbling to be there and to be able to teach. And it's nice to be back, for sure. So, but if you have questions about my trip, please, I'm happy to talk to you one-on-one, or we can talk about it more at some point. But, and also, I sent an email with social media, so if you want to take a look at that too, it's all there. At some point, we'll actually have a lot of the trip shown on a website, so you can see what the journey was and what it was like for us. It's something that my team is committed to doing. We really are very committed to working for and with companies that do social good in the world, and we felt like it's important for us to also do it. So Malawi is the first country we're looking at. We have 2 other countries that have reached out to us as well, and looking at other places to start doing some work with young women. That being said, I thought it'd be nice to do a quick review since it's been 3 weeks since we were in class. So we're just going to start straight from the top, and it's very quick, but I want to just remind ourselves the question of what are we studying? Does anyone remember?
The long run.
The long run, yes. And what is the long run? Everyone's like, yes, good, she got it. Someone's going to do it. the long rim. And what about the long rim? What are the three principal paths, right? Okay, so we're doing the short version of the long rim called the three principal paths, also known as lumsum numsum. And do you remember who it was written by? Or written by whom? Jason Kappa. Yes, 1357 to 1419. Do you remember for who he wrote it for? Good, right. Is it coming up? Nalandrapa, that's right. And do you remember why it was written? It was requested.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So it was requested because he was starting 108 monasteries in the eastern part of Tibet, and he needed a consolidated version. So it was a letter basically written to him, and it was 14 verses that we're studying, and that's the root text that we're looking at. That's great. Do you remember who the commentary was? I think you had it.
Kavanga.
That's right.
Yes.
Kavanga Rinpoche. And do you remember who was translated by? Before, yes, Ken Rinpoche. Yes, and then from there it was translated by Geshe Michael Ridge. That's right. Okay, great. Do you remember what the three principal paths are? Renunciation, bodhicitta,
Correct.
and correct. You. Perfect. And do you remember what renunciation is? I know we just meditated on it, but what's your
a desire to cease a life of samsara, to renounce all of our behaviors which keep us trapped in the merry-go-round. We want to get out of samsara.
Nice. Anyone else want to add to that?
Recognizing limitations in life.
Recognizing the limitations in life. Yeah. What else?
Understanding the impermanence of everything.
Understand the impermanence of everything. Is there anything else? Say. It's good to have it in different ways, because sometimes you need to, I mean, for me at least, I have to hear it in like a ton of different ways, and then something clicks.
Selflessness.
A sense of selflessness. Mm-hmm. In what way?
In reading 3, it talks about. It probably talks about the discovering the middle path.
Yeah.
And the middle way. Scope. And just the in dedication to something outside of yourself.
Yeah.
It's sort of that being the part where you can leave the concern for yourself in the rebirth cycle.
Yeah.
That's going to be if you're striving to maintain your place in samsara.
Yeah.
With the rebirth, that would keep you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is a sense of understanding and realizing that the way in which you are thinking and addressing the world in the conventional way no longer works anymore, and that there is a sense of, renouncing and having renunciation to realizing that it doesn't function in that way, that the way that I exist now, the way I look at the way the world works, and the way that we've been trained, most of us, of, if I work harder, I will get X. If I keep asking, here's a great example. When I was at the airport, Armando and I were at the airport in Malawi when we were trying to get out, and they were just refusing to let us go, even though we totally had enough time. I'm talking to this woman, I'm like, you can let us go, and I see myself like pushing, like the New Yorker in me, it's like I can just keep pushing and just kind of rationalizing, and I'm looking at this woman and realizing there's nothing I can do in this moment to have this woman let us get on that plane. And I remember in that moment thinking, this is a karma that's ripening for me, that I planted in my past that's ripening now, and there's not a damn thing I could do. And I just had to let it go. Like in that moment, I just stepped back and I said, we're done. There's nothing we can do. And I just have to go with it and let it just take its course. And it was, I have to say, as noble as it might have seemed now at the moment, it was like it was surrender in a way, you know? It wasn't like I came from an elevated, high, like correct view of, it was just like, I saw myself pushing and just thinking, I'm screwed if I keep pushing. But I want to keep pushing, but I'm screwed if I do, because I'm just planting these other seeds of me just pushing against something that I know isn't going to work the way I think it's going to. So I have to stop. So my mind intellectually understood it, but my heart was just, you know, like I wanted to just keep pushing this woman. Like, can I talk to your supervisor? Your supervisors, you know, and it just wouldn't work. And so there is a sense of realizing that at some point you do let it go, you know. And when I say let it go, it's not like you let it go to the world or to let it go to God or someone to take it, put it in their hands. It's understanding karma and the function of how karma works, and realizing that in every given moment when a karma ripens, you have no control of that ripening. The only thing you have control is how you're going to respond to that ripening, and that response in that moment is what's going to ripen in the future. So it's just a moment, like when something happens to you, it's just a moment where you realize that you have an opportunity to plant a new seed, and you get to decide what that seed's going to be, and in that very moment is the future that you get to start to create. Does that make sense? So renunciation is, it requires the understanding of limitations and understanding that things don't function the way that they do. And, you know, some people hit a rock bottom before they find that. Some people don't. I think in some degree we all kind of hit a rock bottom, you know, to our capacity. Like I look at what my rock bottoms were compared to some of my friends and colleagues, and it's so much better than what they had to go through. And I thought, oh God, I hope I never have to go through that. That's terrible. You know, and the heartache. But relative to my capacity, it was a rock bottom, you know, and I think that there is a moment where you just try and you try and you try, and you realize that trying isn't going to do it anymore. And that was a hard lesson for me to learn. And it's a lesson that I continuously learn. I don't think it's something that, I don't think you renunciate and then you're done and you just check it off the list and then you move on to the next path. Like, okay, now I'm going to focus on bodhicitta and we're going to do that for 2 years. And then, you know, it doesn't seem to work that way, at least not for me. So it is something where it's a constant reminder. And what's most interesting about renunciation is that it happens in gross ways, you know, very graphic ways, where you know, will get to a place where you realize that money does not bring you happiness. And you really get that. You really start to get that idea, you know, and people always say that all the time. Like you can watch it on Oprah, you can watch it on Ellen show, and everyone talks about money not bringing happiness. And you get a sense of that, but then there are subtle ways where you start to realize that you still think, like, if it were just on sale, you know, it's like, if it was just like a little bit cheaper, right? And there's that sense, and then it gets even more subtle, you know? And so you start to kind of work on this gross level, and then you work your way down to even more subtle and subtle and subtle, where you can just actually get to a place where you really start to understand, how do I actually make money, you know, karmically? If I want to get money, and by getting, how do I plant that seed? By giving, you know? So if I give money with wisdom, then karmically I will ultimately get back the money, you know? And that's where you start to understand what karma really is in the framework of renunciation. What is bodhicitta? Does anyone remember?
Attain Buddhahood for the sake of all beings.
What is it?
The wish to attain Buddhahood for the sake of all beings.
Yeah. The wish to attain Buddhahood for the sake of all beings. What's another way?
I think the word, I'm not sure if I'm right, but Bodhi always means awakening in all these words. But Chitta, I think, literally means mind in Sanskrit. So I think it's awakening mind or mind of awakening, literally translate.
Literally,
which
yeah.
can be helpful.
Awareness.
Awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else?
It really has to encompass other beings.
It has to really encompass other beings. It can't be a standalone thing.
Yeah, like renunciation means you don't want to suffer anymore. Like I want to stop craving
Yeah.
the orange watch band. You know, the green one's it's not as cool as it was when we first got it. The orange one's way cooler. So I gotta stop craving that. But at some point I have to stop craving everything because I need to teach everybody else that this is going to bring me happiness.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a really big level.
Yeah. To be able to teach that, and that's
it's one of those things that goes on and on and on for years and years before you can even grasp how important it is to help everybody else.
So I have a question. We have 3 scopes, like the lesser scope, healing scope.
Yeah.
So does this mean that because it has the for the sake of all the beings?
Yeah.
Does it mean the bodhicitta cannot be, like the lesser scope cannot do bodhicitta?
Let's just go. It's not that they can't, but they don't. It's the practice that they don't. Yeah. Yeah. What else about bodhicitta?
I've heard it defined by the Gelugpa school as including the word spontaneous. It's a spontaneous desire to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. And the word spontaneous, I'm not sure what that means in their school, but it's something like it's not calculated. It's not like I'm doing this for something. It's just they can't help it.
They can't help it.
They just desire it so greatly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that
That's
when
nice.
you experience it spontaneously, it somehow signals that you're on that path of eventual enlightenment.
Yeah. There is a sense of the bodhisattvas that I've been in the presence of. There is a sense of relentlessness where there is no option but to just want to help every being the way that they know us, right? The other word that you'll hear, bodhicitta, that we'll see too, that's synonymous with is virtue. It's really about virtue. Yeah. Okay. Correct view. Do you remember what that is? Anyone?
Emptiness.
Emptiness. What else does that mean? What are other words that you've heard? Correct view be?
Understanding where things come from, where things really come from.
Mm-hmm. Understand like cause and effect and where they really come from.
Nothing exists from, like nothing has its own nature.
That's right. Nothing exists from its own side or has its own nature, right?
Ultimate reality.
Ultimate reality or higher reality. Mm-hmm. Great. Nice. Okay.
What has to do with perceiving like form and formless?
Does it have to do with perceiving form and formless?
Yeah, like do you need to be able to perceive these form?
The direct
Or
perception of
elements.
emptiness to see the form and formless?
To see correctly. To perceive correctly.
Say that one more time. What was the question?
I'll figure myself out.
Are you sure?
I think so.
Okay. You have to, so correct view is, it's the view, but there is the direct perception of emptiness that you have to have in order to reach enlightenment. Yeah. There is that. If that helps. Which isn't really the form and formless, but yeah. It's also the understanding, like you have said, where it is that nothing exists from its own side, right? So, and it's also the idea of cause and effect that we were just talking about, that I was just talking about, that, you know, the one that I always think about is just money doesn't bring you happiness, right? That you know that doesn't work, or, you know, understanding where things really come from. Like an example I think about is when I pick up the phone to call my mom, and I have the same voice, the same tone of voice, and I'm like, "Hi, Mom," and sometimes she'll pick up and she's just really nasty to me. I have no idea why, and there's something going on, but it's just like, what the hell, like, why am I getting? It's nagging and like, and I can't take it. And then other times I pick up the phone, same way, and she's wonderful, really happy and joyful. And so there was this time where I remember thinking for a long time, if I say it this way versus this way, maybe she'll respond differently, maybe, and the fact is I've tested it on so many occasions and it's never true. It never holds true. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And so I start looking at it, I'm like, I do it this way and she's nasty, but if I do it this way and she's nice, and so and so it's interesting because I always think about whenever I call my mother is one of the big tests for me of how do I have correct view of understanding that how she responds to me has nothing to do with how I actually said hello. Has nothing to do with time of day, has nothing to do with my tone of voice, has nothing to do with where she is in the world because she travels. My mother's a flight attendant, like whether it's I've done it maybe a couple days after she has jet lag versus right after her, like so many different ways, and it does not make a difference. And so that for me is like a constant reminder of how does karma really work, and the way in which she actually responds to my hello has to do with how I've responded to someone else in all the different ways that she responds to me. And there are countless times I can remember of picking up the phone and being cranky, when someone calls me, or losing my temper, or, being really nice, or, or being patient or not, or whatnot. And I just remember that all the time. And that's, like, I don't know, that just seems like one of the main examples that I have of correct view. Like, I call my mother.
It's also, I think, a really important part of pronunciation. Get back to, we talk a lot about pronunciation as physical objects. And we talked earlier about analytical meditation. She's doing an analytical meditation. Does her mom have jet lag? Okay, your mind, our minds are spinning like crazy over stupid stuff. Because imagine if you could turn all that around and renounce all of that stupid, gosh, what are they thinking? Should I call? Am I going to get the job? All those stupid things that we analyze, we should really be analyzing from a view of, okay, that's not where it comes from.
Right.
My mom's not angry at me or happy at me because of when I called. I'm not getting this job because of what's on my resume. I'm getting it because of what I've done in the past to earn it. Good and bad.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Sorry.
So is that almost like not a predetermined path, but like we have no control over anything except how we act and put through karma into the world?
Yeah, so it sounds that way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does. I know. So when I think it's course 3 that we talk about how karma works, but in some ways it is predetermined. In that you planted the seeds in the past. So it's like if I were to plant, I started a garden. I just say my partner, I started a garden. Actually, my partner's really started the garden. I just take credit for it. But it's really kind of how it feels. But so it's like, we started this garden and we planted a tomato seed, right? And once you plant that seed, you can't change what that seed's going to ripen to. That's just the way it is. So a few months later, it's going to be a tomato. And now in hindsight, I actually wish that we had more cucumbers because I'm like really loving cucumbers, Does that make sense? So it's the same, in that way it's the same, that there are seeds that you planted in your past that are ripening in this moment or in the future to come. That being said, when we go into how karma works, there are laws of karma, and there are actually ways to supercharge karmas. There are ways to charge them and to ripen certain karmas faster than others. There are ways to cleanse your karmas and purify negative karmas that you've planted to stop it from kind of manifesting or growing too much. And there's weight in different karmas. So that's why when you hear about karma, you always hear about intention being so much. So for instance, if I'm walking on the street and I accidentally step on an ant and I kill an ant, that karma of me killing a being is vastly different than me meditating and going out and killing someone with a gun, and a human for that matter, right? Or even an ant for that matter. If I were to compare the two, if I was like really torturing an ant as a, and trying to kill this ant or however that is. So the intention also makes a big difference of the power of how that karma ripens. But to answer your question, to some degree, you've already planted those karmas in the past. So in the moment, yeah, when they ripen, you're kind of screwed. That's just the way it's going to go down. I mean, to be honest, that is the way it is. And the only thing you can do is make sure that you respond with wisdom so that you just don't perpetuate that negative karma to come back to you again in the future. Yeah.
Notwithstanding that you said earlier, if you did plant the negative karma, you still stand a chance because you said you can purify.
You can purify it if you
don't.
If you know about the purifications, yeah, you can purify. You can lessen the degree of it. There are things you can do to do that. And again, there are ways to supercharge it. But yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. Yeah.
So does this imply that every bad thing that comes to you, that happens to you, is earned?
That you what?
That everything that happens, bad thing that happens to you, you've earned it.
I would say that it's not that you earned it, but you're responsible for it.
You
Well, that's not
planted
the
it. You planted in a way.
You planted that seed, yeah. So philosophically, you have planted that seed, and some of those seeds that you planted. So this is the other thing. Some of those seeds that you planted could have been in this lifetime. It could be in past lifetimes. So there's that as well. And I will say that the more you're on this path and the more that you practice and the more subtle your meditations become, the more clarity you have about your karmas, whether they were in this lifetime or in the past lifetimes. And that's only something that you can, it's a hard thing to actually take, because I remember the first time I heard that and I was like, dude, that's a cop-out. Like, past lifetime, I don't, and I will say, at least from my experience, and also from teachers I've had and colleagues I've had, it's something that you have to just test on your own and see what how that truth is revealed to you. Because when you are in states of deep retreat, for instance, you actually do see, and can see, your karmas that you planted in the past. There are ways to see that. And it's something, all I can say is you can only know if you do it, and you should do it, and you should test it out. And it's not something that I'm saying to you now that you're like, all right, I got it, that's awesome, I'm gonna go with it. You shouldn't go with it. You should actually test it and see how that works. And it's something that I can say, since I've been practicing, I test the philosophy constantly. And I test it, and sometimes I don't, and I look at when it has helped me and how it's helped me and how it hasn't. But one thing I can say personally for me is that the more I hold the view of what these three principal paths are, it has served me incredibly well. And there are moments where I feel incredibly anxious or stressed out or uncertain or scared about different aspects of my life. And when I fall back into the practices, it has held its integrity for me. But again, that's something that all of you are going to have to test on your own time and with your own practice. And someone can say to you as much as you want, but you can't believe it until you feel it, and you can't feel it until you practice. So we can talk about it intellectually in class, which we will, but it's really when you're actually doing that practice. And it's like if you're trying to explain someone like the feeling of falling in love, you can never really do that. And even if you watched a movie as much as you want, like I was talking to a girlfriend of mine about The Notebook. I don't know if you're right? I don't know. If you haven't watched The Notebook, maybe you want to put that on your list. But anyway, I didn't know what it was when I had watched it years ago. I was sick and I just popped in a movie. It's like, but I was talking to a girlfriend about it, like heart-wrenching, and heartbreaking, but even what that movie does for anyone that's watched it, it's not the same until you've actually experienced that on your own, and the same goes with certain realizations. And karma is one of those things too, where the idea of how these karmic correlations work, that only happens through realizations as well. You believe it to a point, but then you start to test it, and then you see how it works for you. Yes.
I think something that needs to be noted too, though, is let alone the fact that you're not the same person you were a year ago, or 10 years ago, or even when you were 5 years old. You're not the same you that you talk about when you in a past lifetime or 50,000
That's right.
past lifetimes.
Sure. Yes.
So the idea that I planted the seed, and so I'm experiencing this negativity or this, this horrible tragedy or whatever, is not like the way we talk about you and me and whatnot. Means me, like this mind that I have now, which is not.
Right, you've evolved since that time.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think that's important to know.
Or and whether or not you were a human that last lifetime, or which lifetime you were.
It's not the you that's now.
Exactly. And honestly, I mean, I have to say, I think you see it too with children. Like, there are certain children that have certain propensities for certain things, and you're like, how on earth? Like, who taught? I see so many parents be like, I didn't teach that kid that. I don't know how he or she, whether it's good or bad, but usually there are certain aspects of their personality where like that, so I'm like, was that you? Like, not, and I see that a lot with parents where they're just like, how did that happen? But I don't know, that's just, yes.
So I have a question. So someone like, let's say someone famous.
Yes.
Who is, can really takes a lot of resources from, like their undue share of resources.
Right.
And so with this person who might have been born into a very, wealthy, easy situation.
Yeah.
So what I don't understand about karma is, take a person like that who really just naturally has all this advantage, but then is just taking it and not really giving. Like,
and how does that work?
Yeah. On the flip side, so if you were a member of, like I'm a member of a race that is been oppressed through the ages, is that karma?
Yeah.
Because it's harder for me, and does that make sense? So does it mean if you're, a member of a class or a group that has it easier, that your karma is better?
No, it's not. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a good question.
Huge question.
I mean, it takes karma to get there, but then they're still in the cycle of suffering. So it like depends, right? Like, are they really philanthropic and generous? Right? Like, are they?
Who are you talking about?
I was thinking of Kim Kardashian.
So let's look at Kim Kardashian. No.
But I'm saying it depends, like, what you do with your wealth, right? And then on top of that, like, say you are just wealthy and you like squander that, or you don't use it for good, then that's going to affect your rebirth.
So there's two things to look at. The first thing is that the life that you're living now is just a speck in the grand scheme of all the lives that you've lived and all the lives that you'll continue to live. I mean, it really is. It's not like it's a 25% of it. You might have been living for like hundreds and thousands of lifetimes, because at one point all of us were that, you were an ant that I stepped on, like you moved up the ladder, and to be born a human is an incredible amount of merit that you've created to be born as a human, and the humans that you will continue to be born as until you're out of this life and you've reached nirvana, or enlightenment, well, nirvana. But to your point, as far as and it's something that I think about as well, is that like I was born a woman, and there's a lot, and I was born in an area there was a lot of racism, And, you know, like, was that something that I deserved? Was that something, like, was someone, like, was the white girl's karma better than my karma? But then you're also looking at it a finite time, right? You have to look at the whole grand scheme of where is that person going to go? Where's their rebirth also? And where's the wisdom? And you're looking at now, like, you're looking at Kim Kardashian's life now through the media, but you have no idea what her life is like and the suffering that she has. You know?
And
You don't know.
that she does too.
Right,
And
well,
the good that she does.
right.
You have no
you
idea.
have no idea. You have no
Or what
idea.
she thinks.
And the thing too is that you don't know who everyone is. So the Buddha, and we've had this kind of conversation in class where the Buddha does manifest in many different ways. And there are people in your life that are manifesting or presenting themselves to you for whatever reason. And that's also something to look at as well. But as far as, you know, how it's a tricky thing, because one thing that I would encourage, and this is something that I think about as well for myself, is as practitioners, stay focused on your practice. You know, don't worry so much about him or her or them, or, you know, and I say the same thing. We're going to go into about teachers today in class, but it really is, this is about you and your life. Your focus needs to be about you. Don't worry about them. You know, use them as opportunities to be able to see where your mind is and where you are in your practice, but that's about it. Because after that, it doesn't matter. You know, the only job that you have is doing what we're just talking about, which is a 3-principle pass. Are you renunciating? Do you have bodhicitta? Like, yeah, okay, Kim has a great life, but does she have pain and suffering? Are there other Kims like that in your life? There are plenty of like that in my life. You know, and to have compassion and understanding that there might be someone who apparently looks like she has no idea how this world really works. And she actually thinks by looking pretty or having those things, or, you know, having that man is actually going to bring her ultimate happiness, where I know that that's not actually true. And when she hits the ground and shit hits the fan, that's going to suck. And that's where it's, as you know, that's our job, to be there for those kinds of people, to give that kind of compassion. So stay focused on that and have the right, correct view. And that's the best thing I can say to that, you know. And also, you're right. I mean, we all come with karmic seeds that have given us the life that we do now. The fact that we're human is a blessing, period. And I can even say that even for when I was in Malawi with the girls, it's fascinating because as much as they have so, like, they have so little compared to us, but the suffering is exactly the same. It is no different. They suffer the exact same human conditions that we do. You know, and when we're there, we teach them so much about compassion, because they're so greedy about themselves and wanting something. Like, if I'm passing something out, it's me, me, me. And I sit there and I'm like, it's your sister first. And the projects that we did was, you did a project and you gave it to your sister and you didn't take it home. And it was hard for them to be able to learn that. You know, it's like, because that's why, you know, it's that, and it was interesting because it's that me first that's going to get them screwed for the next lifetime. And I don't want them to be in that kind of situation again in the next lifetime. But even though, you know, it looked like we're in totally two different universes, the core essence, the core suffering that we have, like me here, and I look at those girls there, it's exactly the same, you know. And does it mean that their life is any worse than mine relatively? It's hard to say. Everyone has a different capacity, you know. So the thing is that with the karma that you've given, with what you have now, stay focused on what you can be. You don't need to be thinking on the bad, but you think on the future of your potential, you know. And that's where your focus should be. Of, okay, I was born a woman. I was born a Black woman in this country where, you know, there has been a great amount of yeah, I mean, it's what's happening in the news is tragic, right? With what's happening with all the shootings with Blacks, you know. But you have to look at that, I think, and start seeing, you know, yes, that is my karma in this life, but does that mean it needs to stay as being a negative? You know, how do you start planting the seeds and make that a positive? Because there are plenty of Black women who have been extraordinary in this world, right? So being a Black woman doesn't mean you're stuck as being a certain kind of person. Does that make sense? Because if that were true, then every Black woman in history or in time or today would feel like they didn't get any headway, that all odds were against them, right? And there are so many that have actually done remarkable things and have transformed our history, you know? And that goes the same for all of us, right?
So I have a question. Does the phenomenon of deja vu play a role in feminism?
No.
Not at all. It's interesting to have this feeling of I actually sat in this place at some point in time, and I must do something differently to not be in this place again.
Yeah. So you probably, if you ever do have that moment, it may not be I've heard different things, like I've heard articles, and someone here probably can speak about it much better than I can, but from what I've heard about deja vu is that it's like a short circuit in your memory, from what I've heard. Has anyone heard? Is that true, Brittany? Something like that?
Yeah, so the science behind it is a little bit where, at least the view of it currently is that it's almost as if, because your brain has an ability to sort of predict future occurrence, and that's how we fill in the blanks, especially with memory. And so deja vu is an occurrence in which your brain kind of short circuits in a way that you're basically projecting what's about to happen next based on previous experiences that cover that situation, but not necessarily be precise at that. So that's kind of where that neuro.
Wait, so it didn't happen before, but you kind of envisioned it?
Yeah, you're filling in the blanks as you go sometimes. So neurologically, you're creating that scenario, and when you do experience it, it feels as if you've already done it. That's because there's an anticipatory sort of step ahead in your brain. But again, that's like the neurological view, the brain view, and not necessarily the holistic view. So I don't necessarily subscribe entirely to that, but that's the explanation now.
There's nothing in the scriptures that talk about deja vu, but it's not to say that you can't have visualizations when you're in a meditative state. No. But that, from what I've heard, it's not really like a deja vu sort of experience.
Okay. So can it be thinking that since karma is like a print in your emotional memory, maybe you can live in one of your lives some kind of event that leaves a really strong print, and then if you are surrounded by similar conditions, you will have that again. That can be like
I mean, it's kind of like that. So when you have a karma, you plant that seed, and depending on the conditions that you are around, that seed will ripen at different ways.
And then you have the choice to act differently or the same way you did before.
Then you have the choice, right? But that's true. There are conditions of which karma can ripen. So there are some karmas that are kind of dormant because the conditions aren't appropriate. It's like planting, literally, it's like planting a seed in a garden where, like, as much as I really want a lemon tree here, it's just not going to probably happen because the conditions aren't right. So it's the same thing with karma. Okay. So just to go through, we have renunciation, which is pretty much what keeps you motivated. Bodhicitta is pursuing, its virtue is what you pursue. And then correct view, which is understanding and the perception of higher reality. Just like a quick summary. I saw it this way, and I thought it was a nice way to kind of break it down. And I just want to show some of the images that were sent for the renunciation assignment for those of you that have submitted. Thank you for submitting, for those of you who did. Those who haven't, feel free to send forth. We'll keep adding it to we call this a mood board in advertising, where it's like images to help. So I don't know, it's kind of nice to see visuals of what people think renunciation means to them. most of these came with, actually, I should say all of them came with a short description, which I didn't add in, but I thought it'd be nice to just see the images. Okay, so, ooh, we are so late behind. Okay, we're gonna break out and do a quiz, and then after that, we'll take a break. And we'll break into, we're gonna do, those of you who had, cooked food for lunch today.
For lunch.
Yeah, over here. Those of you who did not have cooked food, like salad, basically, or anything raw or a juice, over here. And those of you who skip lunch can be over there. So 3 groups. Okay?
Yeah, that's too. You cooked your food?
Oh, yeah, are you?
Oh, yeah.
So are we doing the quiz?
Oh yeah, you're doing the quiz as a group. Just make sure to put everyone's name.
Yeah, right.
Wait,
And I
which one is the
don't, we don't have that.
which one's the cooked food?
Cooked,
This one?
raw, none.
Okay.
We don't have that much time, so I'm going to give you about 10-ish minutes. So divide and conquer if you have to.
Erica?
So,
Yeah.
What is this?
I don't even have a question. That's so easy.
What is the sign for?
Oh, yeah.
I think it's
Great. Very close.
There's just so many translations every word I get mixed up.
Is there any
Any relationships between us and the race between these three?
Didn't like the right one.
And then between these three,
Okay.
You just
I'm reading
And Sanskrit is nice because it's actually developed the translation. Realizing emptiness
because they are.
pronunciation.
Right, like you have to practice.
So yeah, you enunciate so when you realize it's empty.
I missed that part of the meeting.
yes. They just want to say yes.
I think it's the singers, and then what's the other half?
The next question is between these
I mean, I did, yeah, so because if you practice them, correctly and the way and how it ends, it will lead you to potential practice.
So relationship between, so what is direct perception and and to prepare yourself for it, you've got to take this.
I don't
yeah, I mean, yeah, you have to.
And I was saying, you can say we don't know the progression.
According, I guess, according to the.
You have the desire when they do say that. It will almost be automatic, and you. That's what you gotta say.
Yeah, I'm done. When you're out here, what is
No, no, absolutely fine, because we're on the ANRP, the NMA, and both of the So there can be a case where there is three guys and also
So if you practice,
yeah,
it would be you to. Yeah, because it gets
right,
a lot
they
of.
can
Yeah,
purchase with
right,
investors.
Yeah, yeah. But what I was gonna say is it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. It has to be strong.
What are the two principal causes to bring about the state? Two principal causes.
What are the two principal causes that bring about the sleep?
I'll tell you exactly.
But no,
One will be wisdom, the other will be method, which will be
what are the two principal
method is not
causes
necessarily what
that bring about the
it
sleep?
means. Ethical lifestyle together. And then the second
Different view.
Second method.
Yeah, and method is also.
When you're talking about the three principal patterns,
How you accumulate your supernatural.
yes.
And then there's also wisdom, which is how you create a mind.
Wisdom.
But there are two causes. Two principal causes.
Causes that bring about the state or
Part of the three paths. Correct view. Start off. You have wisdom.
Yeah, think about it. Yeah, it's good.
If you don't know the answers, you can cruise through it, we'll go over it as a group.
What are the main elements?
No, these are some common questions.
What are the main elements?
Method is renunciation, wisdom is. That was one thing I was we're talking about understanding.
So the base back where you're back here.
Once you get it, you understand, you have certain understandings that become crystal clear to you. All the stuff you're talking about is no longer thought, it's reality. You know all the Taoists.
Yeah. That's the first part. And then what it says elements.
So that's
I remember I was in France, years ago. Not there anymore, but I remember.
So
So it's the same. First time you see that piece, a big shot to the last split second, and you'll know.
Somewhere.
That's the first time. But eventually you'll grow. But then you'll be. So the first time you see it, is precursor is negotiation. You see that reference? Foregone conclusion, I'm sure you pick up.
That one's mine, Bobby. Yeah, okay. I do not understand how.
So I think maybe put it first and then put it in line with the object. And so. Yeah. So that's
No, I was just trying to connect with one of them, so, like, already by.
I have either RUPA,
Well.
no H is there, except for non.
And then what are the names?
Well, first back to the question that we just answered before.
Like, two bodies are yeah.
Everyone is very
So the
similar.
physical body is
Collection of.
Collection of.
So down the pattern consciousness.
From the two different ways. Or collection of virtues.
And the other is the theory of bodies, right? That's the goal for collection.
Richard just said that. So we can go through it.
So the three principal paths.
Pronunciation and
I think they're saying correctly. It makes sense.
Weren't you and Thomas in the same group all the time?
Yeah.
So funny.
It's all about watching.
With all three of you guys though?
I don't pay attention to any of the rules. I just.
You just want to go sit next to Thomas?
If you're gonna separate the two syllables,
Wait, but we guys were in the same group last time. It's a boy thing.
You're gonna talk about like different
Name one of the causes.
What do you mean? This is a different criteria. Last time it was closed, remember? Last time was colored. It was 3 weeks ago. Last time was closed. This time was what you ate.
collection of merits.
So next to up, they be in a group with somebody that will read it in a group.
Yeah, but then that would be too complicated. Maybe, actually, for not you three.
You have
There's
to
a collection of merits in past lives.
I have to do a count off.
Yeah, I mean, everything is. So like by doing this, like saying that's.
No, we're done.
Yeah, it helps us.
We're not
Yeah, I mean, well, they're like different. Right, that's just saying, well, yeah. Oh, so you're planting seeds now for the future. But like when I'm planting a seed now, I don't know.
It doesn't matter, you have to learn.
It's like, the next lifetime.
Okay, we're gonna go through the answers together. If you haven't gone through it, it's okay. What is the Sanskrit word for the great seal? Mahamudra. What's the Tibetan? Make sure you have everyone's name on your quizzes, by the way. They do check. Next one. Is there any relationship between the 3 principal paths and the Great Seal?
Yes.
Yes. What is it? Anyone?
You have to have,
When you practice, I think, when you practice the 3 principal paths, you accumulate a lot of merit and virtue, which leads you to the tantric practices, and doing tantra leads you to the direct perception of emptiness, which is Mahamudra and the Great. Something like that?
Close, close. That's pretty close. Yes.
Isn't that just eventually that golden enlightenment?
Yeah, so it's that Mahamudra is the direct perception of emptiness. You don't have to actually have a tantric path to see the direct perception of emptiness, technically. You don't have to. Yeah, you don't have to. But the idea is that the 3 principal paths, if you practice them, even from a sutra level, you can actually have gain Mahamudra. Yeah. It's an accelerated path to be on a tantric path, but it's not a required.
oh.
Yeah.
I thought you had to have one to have that.
No.
Like,
You could have the karma where you understand the 3 principal paths, and you have the direct perception of emptiness without having tantra.
so is there no relation then?
So there is a wait. So what was the question?
It's a natural progression.
Yeah.
It's so the 3 so the 3 correlation between. Oh, I see.
By studying the 3 principal paths, it's a natural progression,
It's a natural progression to seeing direct perception of emptiness.
which is Mahamudra.
But
But you don't need to practice and gain merit in order to achieve tantric practice, like you.
you do.
No, you definitely don't.
But
definitely
isn't it that you can't achieve Mahamudra without the 3 paths?
Yes, but you don't necessarily need to have tantra in order to see the direct perception of emptiness. Does that make sense?
Right. You do need the direct perception of emptiness to become enlightened or path.
Yes. Yes. And what tantra does is that it's an accelerated path to be able to see that. That's what it is, but it's not required though.
So both are accelerated paths to.
Which are? So the 3 principal paths. If you study the 3 principal paths, it will. When you do it well, then it will lead you into Mahamudra. Yes.
And the same thing with tantric practice.
The same thing with tantra can also do the same, but you don't necessarily need to have
one
tantra.
to have the.
One clarification in the readings that we try to make it clear that if you don't have the 3 principal paths, you'll be not successful in tantra.
No, you can't.
And if you do the 3 principal paths, tantra will happen almost without effort, without actually practicing.
Yeah,
tantra.
it will just
it
will roll you into it, I guess is the best way to say it. If you actually practice the 3 principal paths and you do it, it will roll you into tantra. That's the best way to say it.
Yeah.
It's not like you have to have it on your bucket list. You will just fall into it. What are the 2 principal causes that bring about the state of Buddhahood?
Method and wisdom.
Yes. And, what are the main elements of these 2?
Renunciation and bodhicitta.
Yes.
And perception of emptiness.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome.
Yes. That was a tricky one, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was tricky. It was a little kind of like a trick question. So technically with method, it's renunciation and bodhicitta, or wish for enlightenment. And the second one, wisdom, is correct view of emptiness. So when we had this slide before, do you remember last time? Oops, sorry. Sorry. Okay. When you guys tell this one, for method, we had bodhicitta next to it, and wisdom, we had correct view next to it. Renunciation is technically the prereq before you have method and wisdom, but the way that they're actually articulating the main elements of method and wisdom is collapsing renunciation and bodhicitta into method, which is a little, I think that's a bit of a trick question.
So then for wisdom, it would be the correct view of emptiness.
So for wisdom, it's a correct view of emptiness. That's right. What are the two bodies of a Buddha?
Rupakaya and Dharma.
That's right. Dharmakaya and Rupakaya. And I think last time you had asked, someone was asking about the form body, if whether or not that was like a literal, if it was literally trying to look like the Buddha. And when we talked in class last time, if you remember, it was that the body has technically two different types. There's the paradise body and the emanation body. So these are just two kind of, I mean, they're just words, but they're two different facets of what a Buddha is that you would want to achieve, the mind and the body. And the mind is obviously, that's, you understand what that is. But the idea of the form body is the emanation of the body. That when you reach Buddhahood, you actually have a way of being in the formless realm, or you can actually be in multiple forms and emanate in multiple ways. So you hear stories in the scriptures of the Buddha can be a bench for someone to sit on. It could even be food. You know, the Buddha can emanate as people to however best serve the people that he is, to best serve people. Yeah.
Or a dog.
Or a dog, right? You have the story of the dog, which is really pretty. Name the two causes of the two bodies. Anyone?
The collection of wisdom and the collection of merit.
What was it?
Collection of wisdom and collection of merit.
Yeah. Collection of wisdom and collection of merit. And last one is, which of the three principal paths cause each of these two bodies?
Renunciation and bodhicitta cause Rupakaya.
Yeah.
And correct view causes Dharmakaya.
Nice.
But how would bodhicitta not cause the Dharmakaya? This is what always confused me.
Oh. Yeah, in the scriptures they talk about the collection of merit being renunciation because it's your collection, because bodhicitta is virtue. So it's the merit that you're collecting.
So it's because it's the wish for enlightenment for the sake of all beings, and it's not the actual achievement of enlightenment for the sake of all beings?
It's because it's the merit, it's because it's virtue, it's because bodhicitta is synonymous to the idea of virtue, and so the virtue is what collects your merit.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Renunciation is what puts you on the path.
Renunciation is what puts you, which starts you on the path, but bodhicitta is what gives you the merit. It gives you the merit to be able to have Rupakaya. So it's going to go under the collection of merit. It wouldn't go under collection of wisdom. Correct view is what, so like the viewpoint, right? Wisdom is going to be the view. That's what, right? And bodhicitta, it's bodhicitta is virtue. It's actually the wish for enlightenment, but it's the doing of wanting to help all beings, right? It's wishing it, the intention, but also doing, and that feeds into merit.
So it's because it's just the wish, it's not the achievement of that.
No, it's full. The intention and the achievement of it still is the achievement of it. I wouldn't say even achievement, because the intention alone is really what charges your karma. Like if you have the intention wanting to help someone, but you didn't actually end up helping them, the intention alone is what charges that karma. So it's not so much of whether or not you were, the measure of success is whether it actually worked or not. But that intention, that wish for it, in the action of doing is what gives you merit. Is what's virtuous and gives you merit.
The karma of bodhicitta is like the apple seed to the apple tree. So the karma of bodhicitta is you're helping other bodies, you're helping other beings. is going to create the body of the Buddha.
But how does that not create, but what I'm saying is how does that not create the mind?
It also, I mean,
Do you see what I'm saying?
I do.
Motivates the desire to create the mind, but bodhicitta itself is not the doing good for others, it's the desire. The compassion element of bodhicitta gives the virtue, and then the renunciation is avoiding harmful action. So avoiding harmful action and giving, avoiding harmful action and gathering virtue gives you the merit. Right?
In the actual answer, Alana,
Yeah.
it says one primarily does this, the other primarily.
Yeah. But both
They all
do,
Yeah. Right, because
it's not like, I mean,
because it's not like a Buddha really collects, like a Buddha doesn't collect merit because they're outside samsara.
no, but these are the things that you're trying to do to attain Buddhahood.
I see.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess.
But you have to remember,
that's what
it's
you're
not.
saying that they all
do.
everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
90% this way and 10 whatever it is.
Yeah. Like the breakdown.
But you're right, it is collecting wisdom as well as collecting virtue.
Right.
But it's collecting more virtue because it's more of a
Like actionable.
action
Yeah.
and physical kind of.
Okay.
It's the merit.
Okay.
You know, the other thing too, I think it's also in the context of how we function in the West, where it feels like, I mean, I just think about the education system here too, where things are very linear in our thought process. And the thing that you'll start to realize in the philosophies is that it's not so linear. And also you have to remember that we are also getting it. It's being translated into English. So it's the same thing if you have to know multiple languages, even that translation is never that linear, right? There's only so many words to be able to do that. And so the teachings that we're getting, Geshe Michael has distilled it down to a method where it's more linear in thought process for Westerners, but you also have to remember that when it's being taught, there is a sense of lots of I don't want to say gray, but it's not a linear path. So the things that we're seeing, I mean, I have a chart to visualize what we're being taught, but I'll be honest, I've never been taught with a chart like this before. I don't know anyone else that's been in classes that have, Geshe Michael has never shown me a chart. That's just the way it makes sense to me. So it may look like this is one thing, this is another, and I've had conversations with even my teacher, and he's like, that's, but it, poetically speaking too, it's not like this is one thing and this is another. It does mirror.
Right. Like they can't necessarily be that separate. Right?
No, they're very interconnected, right? Yeah. Okay, so we are going to start with how to take a lama. I'm going to take like a quick 3-minute potty break and then come back. I'm going to say 5, and then we'll get started. Thanks.
Thank you so much for
It's a No,
I'm good.
You're good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Brad.
So Chuku is the wisdom.
Thank you.
Is the
I'm
so we never did
Yeah, sure.
Super Chuku. The one we didn't get is number 1. Look at this one. And we didn't do the Tibetan. Where it says Tibetan trap.
Is this it right here?
Chakya is gesture, and Chopo is Shen is greater. I don't know.
It's still broadcasting.
What's up, class?
I don't know if I can without it. No.
No, you can just take the volume down.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter the more you know this. Every time you do it, just need to do it. Yeah. Share, okay, share is when we're gonna see 1,000 times. Pronunciation of word cheat. Wait, when we get that's going to that. I know I had a computer here.
Yeah. Oh. But you, do we stop?
No, we don't. If you do, you gotta reset it. Yeah, good question. We found that out the hard way. You can if you want to. You have to reset it. Then you're gonna name it, the second name.
Doing a new event and all that.
I have the time and track of the two quizzes.
Okay, wait.
So the method is yay.
We crossed 2 already, right? Yeah, it's class 2, right? Wait. Should go in super like that. I don't have any episode stuff.
You know what I mean? It's not like
Did you get, what are we doing, the wisdom?
1 year.
Yes.
I know.
I don't want yes. There's a guy named Yesha.
Really? Really?
Yeah. Yesha. He's the reason I didn't come back to. Have you heard the story?
No.
Okay, so this king is captured by them. And the enemy demands his weight and gold. So his son comes to school. You take that little pen and get this famous teacher, Tisha, and say your next walk is come to that. So the man sacrifices Yesha is his name. And Yesha. You'll hear that story again. The teacher really goes into that. So yeah, what else do we need? Oh, what was the other one? That was Sunan.
Yes, I have that.
Well, he's so
This and the main
elements of method and wisdom. Yeah, so enunciation, go to cheese. That's good. Look at the notes.
So it's good. Okay. It was a rough.
What are the main elements of enunciation, go to cheese? You're back in class 1.
Yeah.
Oh, pronunciation, go to cheese in the correct way. So yeah, that can't be right. So
And that's great. Yeah. Yeah. In our neighborhoods, I think that's why I show up.
what are you looking for?
First they go to
Okay, here we go. That names with 3 parts. Pronunciation, go to change correctly. So renunciation is again, the second go to choose Jen is giving
It's like, and it's not.
Oh yeah, Yang is correct.
No, actually I don't. I just wanted to be the eighth. I wanted to be the eighth group. A plus group, not even a group teacher.
One week could go. But we also do that. Like, well, you're unstable, you want unstable there. We can go together. Yeah. So that's what we're doing. We actually have that today. Yeah.
I mean, those low income brackets though are insane because
Wait, but what's the one? Did they look at it?
no, it's to change. It changes. Yeah, because I applied for long term when I was living. I was in Colorado, and I got low income because the building. So if you know down the Broadway where I was living before we went there, part of their and the suburb. And it was like the rent for the one that I was looking at was like a single. The basic the bracket is like at least this is the application like that, but it was like for a single person, there's different brackets. Like you can be family or be household thousand or something ridiculous like that. And then even for a single though, it's like you can make there's like a gap in between.
Yeah, you have to make as much as this,
but less than this. And as much was like 45, but less than like 100 or 95. It was like yeah, it was like this crazy gap. And I'm like, done. I'm just gonna apply. And I applied and I got a lottery. Yeah, this was years ago, and I was in Boulder, and I was like, you should just. I know, but then there was so much up there, but it was like Upper West Side, and I'm like.
But then we wouldn't have paid.
The rent for the apartment was somewhere around, I want to say it was like 15.
Getting the lottery though is like getting through my life.
Is it? I felt like it was so easy for me, and I'm like,
50,000.
it's because, but the thing, it depends on what you do, like,
And it depends on the bracket.
yeah, because the thing is that I came as a single woman at a certain age, and, you know, it was like, I was attracted, like, you know, they look at your profile, and they get you look at all these things, and I just was like, and I was like, maybe I should get into the general movement at one point, it was like, because I could qualify for a junior group. And I was like, I should have done that, but they're like, I'm like, what's that? I'm sorry, you can get really class. No, I'm good. Uh, 13th of August. Will you send me? I'll just put it in my calendar.
I'm very much here about trying to do that. We're going to cook, we're probably going to pasta.
Who's we?
We might bring them there. And then just have to do this.
That's good.
But it's okay food there. We'll have like, we'll probably just have wine or something. That's just, you know, 30 minutes.
I have shorts. Okay, send me that. I'd love to go. All right. Yes. Thank you.
Is this the?
What?
I was gonna ask you to tell me.
Okay. So we'll go over 10 minutes if that's okay. Is that okay with everyone or no?
Yeah.
We'll just go over 10 minutes and then cut it off there, and then just take it and then finish it up next class. Maybe less. We'll just see. Some 10 minutes or less. Sorry I went over, but I felt like we needed the review. Okay, so we're going to be talking about class 3 is really about how to take a llama. Or, you know, llama, teacher, mentor, I don't know, however you want to, what makes sense to you. So there's the importance of taking a teacher at some point if you're serious about your practice. You know, anything that you learn in your lifetime, you've always had a teacher, whether it was your mother, or which they say is your first teacher, right, in your life. If you had the fortune to have one. Your teachers in school,
any sports, music, anything you've learned, you've always had someone to teach you something. And the same thing goes for a spiritual practice, that you do have to have a teacher teach you the content. Reading it alone is not going to do it. It's like trying to learn, I would even say a language, quite frankly, just by the books. It's not the same thing as having a dialogue and conversation and having people teach you, right? So anything anything new that you've ever learned, you've always had a teacher, and the same goes with the spiritual practice. And we're going to start looking at what you need to look at when you find a teacher, because they have access to your mind. And it's a very serious topic that I think we really need to spend time on. You should not take it lightly. And a lot of the times they have access to your mind in times where you're most vulnerable, quite frankly. So much of the practice is really about opening up your heart. And when you have that vulnerability, you want to make sure you're taking a really good look at who has access to that, who's feeding you that content and that information as you move and progress in your spiritual practice. So checking out your teacher, not meaning like checking out your teacher, but assessing your teacher is incredibly important, not just for your current lifetime, but it's actually important for your future lifetime as well, for your future lives, because it will inform you of how you start to plant your seeds moving forward, and the relationship with a teacher can be incredibly intimate and very close, but you have to know what's appropriate and what's not. There's a lot of stories that I'm sure some of you have known, or things that you see in the media too, of teacher-student relationships that are very corrupt, and it happens a lot. And especially in the Buddhist practice, for a long time, it's been so many male teachers that you see that have taken the seat of a teacher. And so, like, even for me as a woman, I think I'm already very cautious about male teachers and what that relationship is like, and being really clear about what that looks like, and what their intentions are. But that being said, there are female teachers as well that I've seen that have very much taken advantage of students as well. So just be cautious of that and watch that and be clear about and start to understand what are the qualities that you need from a teacher. You will start to actually also, the more time you spend with a teacher, you actually start to become more like them as well. So take a look at how they are and what they're like. And take your time. So I was thinking about class today and how I could shed some light on the importance of taking a teacher. And I thought it'd be worthwhile sharing my story of how I found my teacher. So when I started my practice, much like many of you, I started 7 years ago with really no intention of wanting to find a teacher at all. I really came to class to just listen, and I liked, for the most part, the philosophy of Buddhism, and it resonated with me. And I grew up in a Christian family, and for some reason that never just really stuck as I became older, and Buddhism really appealed to me. And I understood the value of having a teacher. I've had many different types of teachers in my life. I studied classical music, very typical Asian upbringing, with many different musical teachers. I think at one point I studied the violin, and at one point I had 5 different teachers for one instrument. No kidding. I mean, my parents were crazy about it, and I had a teacher for my private lessons. I had a teacher for just my bow arm. That's all she looked at. I had a teacher that was about evoking my emotions and made me cry about Beethoven's moments and sadness and how I should feel connected to the music and what he was going through. And I was a teenager and kind of thought it was strange, but that's what I had. I had a teacher that was strictly for chamber music ensemble. So those of you that don't know what chamber music is, it's just string instruments, and we just did a quartet of 4 for me and 3 other friends of mine. I had another teacher that was for my symphony, and I was in 2 different symphonies, so I had a ton of different teachers. So and also coming from an Asian background, there's always this idea of teachers that you always like have in your life, that you're supposed to be respectful of elders, and every elder in your life is a teacher to some degree. So the idea of teachers wasn't a foreign concept, and even in college I was very particular about having a mentor in my life. It was something I was always used to having. But when it came to the spiritual practice, for some reason it wigged me out, and I wasn't ready, and I waited quite a long time. I had a lot of colleagues and I would say like Dharma brothers and sisters that were always eager to push a teacher onto me, like try him or try her, or this person would be great. What about this? And don't you find them moving? And I was always, if you ever talk to anyone that has been on my with me with my spiritual practice, they've always talked about G being the one that's always like pushing it away, and I was always just waiting, and I did not jump into it very quickly. It took, I would say, almost 5 years of me practicing constantly, and I would even say that I didn't even seek for a teacher. She just kind of found me, and I had a lot of lists, like resume qualities that my teacher needed to exhibit for me. That's just the way my mind functioned, and I had this idea of what my teacher should be like. I wanted my teacher to be a woman, and there were no women teachers at the time that I knew of. I wanted my teacher to be a woman of the world, that she wasn't just a teacher, not that that's not okay, but for me, I wanted her to be someone who was multifaceted, that had worked and was also a teacher and was a mother and a wife, and I wanted this multi-dimensional woman figure. And a few years ago, I had reached a point in my life for some reason where nothing was quite working well. Work was really, really dry. I was working for myself, and it's like no matter how hard I tried to find work, it's like every opportunity evaporated. I was living in a place with my sister at the time, and also my partner, a romantic partner. And my sister was getting married and moving out. We had a huge apartment in Williamsburg. And my partner and our relationship fizzled away. And I was left with this massive apartment, I remember, with no money in the bank, of I should get rid of this apartment, I have to find a new place to live. My partner left me. My sister, I felt left me. And was kind of scraping at the bottom of the barrel, trying to figure out what to do next. And I remember at the time, it was trying to grasp towards anything, and I couldn't even grasp at nothing. I couldn't even get anything. It was impossible, and it was so frustrating, but also so defeating because I couldn't go anywhere. And at the time, ironically, my who's now my ex, was talking to a good friend of his, probably talking to him about how crazy I was, I don't know, and trying to get some advice. And I think my partner at the time felt like G needs help. She needs someone, and it's not going to be me because I'm out of here. I'm moving, I'm out of here, and she needs to find a way, and it needs to be her practice. And at that point in my life, I'll be honest, I don't think I even, as much as I would say I was trying to practice, I was practicing in a place with no wisdom. There was no renunciation. My practice was meditating of how to keep my partner, that, right? It was that kind of stuff, right? Or what do I do to keep him, or how do I get more, it was no idea of how, nothing of the 3 principal paths was at all resonating in my mind. And I would even call my teachers, and they would just, at the time, I think they just entertained me. I was such a nervous, I was a total wreck. And my partner at the time, his friend had said, I'm going on a retreat And I think it might be good for G, and there's a spot that opened up. And so he came home that time and said, hey, listen, you know, I just spoke to so-and-so, and there's a retreat that he's going to, and it sounds interesting, maybe you should go. And I have done some group retreats, but always with people I knew. I'd never done one on my own. And I was like, I'm not going to retreat. And the thing about retreats, I don't know about you guys, but they're always some like sunny, beachy places, right? Like like Costa Rica, and I hate the beach. So I was like, I'm not going on a retreat. I hate the beach. I'm depressed. You're leaving me. Everyone's leaving me. I have no money. I don't want to do this. And he's like, why don't you just give him a call and see what this retreat is about? And I already had this criteria in my head where I was like, I don't want to go to the beach. I don't want to go to some retreat with some guy that's like teaching me how to be a practitioner. I'm not interested. I have a list of what I want my teacher to be. If I'm going to go anywhere, which I can't go anywhere because I have no money, it needs to look a certain way. So I called up this friend of ours, and he had said, so listen, there's this retreat that's happening. And I said, I know, but I don't want to do something sunny. He goes, well, it's not somewhere sunny, actually. It's off the coast of Washington. It's in the San Juan Islands. And I grew up in Portland, Oregon, so I love the Northwest. And he's like, it's a little island, and it's not beachy. The Northwest beach is like, it's cold, which I like. Like you go to the beach and you wear a sweatshirt, and it's dreary, and I was feeling dreary. Like when you're depressed, you don't want sunshine, you just want like gloom, you know? And like, I wanted it to be like dark and gloomy and like cold and damp, you know? And she's like, well, it's the San Juan Islands. I said, okay, well, I don't really want to go to a retreat where there's some guy that's like teaching me how to be a practitioner. He's like, actually, it's a woman. I was like, what? He's like, it's a woman. I'm like, okay, but I don't want those women that always just, you know, are teaching and they're not women of the world. She's like, well, actually, she has kids. She has a few. She's older. She happens to be Tibetan, which actually wasn't on my criteria list at all, but I was like, well, that's a plus. She also worked and just kind of, you know, it like all the things I had on my list checked off. And so then I was left with the last thing, because I was giving all these reasons why I shouldn't go. And the last thing I said was, well, I have no money, so I can't go. He goes, no problem, I got it. I'm paying for your trip. And I said, what? He goes, yeah, I'm paying for your ticket. You're going to go out there. A spot opened up. All I asked is that you help someone else someday to get into retreat. And I couldn't say no. I so badly was looking for excuses, and I couldn't say no. And in that moment, I thought, well, I have no work. I should be networking. I should be finding work. I should go look at a temp agency. I have people moving out in a couple of weeks. I need a roommate or something. I have nobody. I have this apartment that I should get rid of, but maybe I shouldn't. I didn't know what to do. And I just let it go. And it was so frightening, because I'm a planner. I plan well in advance. I have a method to my madness, which I don't even think it's like structure is important. Order is vital. And I got on a plane to Washington, to Seattle, and then got on this little tiny plane that was like, I think it's like a 6-seater. It's tiny, and then got onto this other plane and landed. And I met my teacher there. And I didn't even anticipate it actually to happen. In fact, I probably even landed with so much, I was so guarded and just like, I don't know, I'm going to check this woman out. She happened to be not in the Galupa lineage, she's in the Sakya lineage, which is a different lineage. But something happened for me. And it wasn't something that anyone could explain, you know, of how it would happen. Every individual, all of you have your own path and your own journey of when you meet your teacher. And I so happen to have a teacher that is perfect for me within my capacity. She is someone who is older, and very wise, but she's not the kind of teacher that needs me or wants me to be by her side 24/7. There are teachers like that have that kind of relationship. She's a teacher when I've hung out with her. I'm like, what do you want to do and how can I serve you? And she's like, let's go shopping. And I'm like, awesome, we're going shopping? Like, and she's this old Tibetan woman who's, we go to like, I'm like, where do you want to go shopping? And we'll go to like Crate and Barrel, and it's just, you know, and it's interesting how your teacher will manifest for you when you're ready for it. But I will say though that the only way that happened for me was there was a sense of renunciation that happened, not by choice, before I left, where I just had to just give up. I couldn't fix the way my life was anymore. I had tried and it wasn't working, and I really had nowhere to go. And I only really got on that plane because I had no other option. And when I got back, I remember being on the plane, coming back, being like, what do I do now with my life, you know? And while you're in retreat, you have no internet, right? You're not really talking, or you're not talking at all. And you're doing your practice. We slept in tents outside. I met one of my closest girlfriends there. And when I came back, I got a new client immediately. That was one of my biggest clients that completely changed the course of my career. A week after I got back, I got this random email from this woman who was living in London that was moving to New York and was a fashion designer for Rag & Bone. I don't know if you guys know what it's a women's fashion, it's a fashion line, but anyway. And said, I'm looking for a place, and I saw a posting that you had on Craigslist. By the way, my posting on Craigslist had been up for months, and no one ever responded. And so it was like, this woman was Skyping me and said, looks great, I'm in, and moved in. And since then, the path of my life has changed drastically. And even to the point where I had left, years later, I'd left New York after I was done, thinking I was done with New York, moved to Boulder to reunite again with my ex who had left me, to try it again, round two, and trying to figure out how to make that relationship work. And I remember I went to go see my teacher again. And one thing that I will be honest with all of you is that I never asked my teacher for advice, because if they give you advice, you have to take it. So I don't ask. I never ask. I don't go, you know, some people like to ask for advice. I don't ask for advice because I'm afraid what they're going to tell me. So I went to go see my teacher. She's like, how are you doing? How is life? What's going on? I'm telling her my story. I'm in Boulder now, and, you know, new phase in my life. I've been there for almost a year, and we're going through everything. And I'm telling her what I'm thinking about the new phase of my career in my company that I was about to launch. And she says, that's great. So when are you moving back to New York? And I said, I'm sorry? And in that moment, I'm thinking, oh, she's Tibetan. She doesn't understand English, right? Although I've been speaking English to her the whole time, right? So I said, oh, no. I think you misunderstood. I live in Colorado and Boulder, and then now I'm speaking really slowly, right? I live in Boulder, not New York. She goes, I know, but you're moving back to New York now. And I said, no, I think you misunderstood, you know, so I'm doing it again. And she looked at me like I didn't get it. She goes, no, and it was so ironic because at the time, my partner and I were saying, we're thinking we want to move away from Boulder. So we had the world map out, and we're thinking about where we wanted to move, you know, and thinking of all these different options. And I never told her that because I didn't want her to tell me where to go, you know. And I didn't tell her a lot of things, quite frankly, because I just was like, you know, patting it. And she said, and I said, well, I can't just move to New York. I have a partner. And what do I do there in that relationship? And at the time, that relationship was not really sticking. It wasn't really working. Round two was not looking so hot, but I was forcing it to make it happen. And she said, don't worry, it will figure itself out, but you need to move back to New York. Not only do you move back to New York, but you need to move back to New York and you can't live in the city. You have to live away from the city, alone, in a place with a lot of nature. And you need to figure out how to make that happen, but that's where you're going to go. And I thought, like, shit. I didn't ask for advice, you know? And I had it. And so I walked out, and there were some girlfriends that were sitting outside this room waiting for me, and how did it go? And they all knew that I was figuring out where to move next, my partner and I. And I said, well, I think I know where I'm moving. I don't have a choice. At that point, it's almost the fear of not doing it was much greater than doing it. You know, you can't, the relationship had already been established between me and my teacher. And I didn't have a car. My partner had a car at the time, but I didn't have one. At the time as well, I had taken so much time off of work that I didn't have that much money on my own. We had money together, but on my own, I didn't have anything. And so I came back, I saw her, this was in Minnesota, came back to Boulder and saw my partner, and I said, guess what? I think we know where we're moving. And he said, where? I said, we're moving back to New York. And he couldn't do it. He's like, I can't do it. I can't move back. And in that moment, it became clear where our paths are. We didn't have to make that choice, right? The choice was already made. And then I thought, okay, well, we're going to go our separate ways. And then from there it became, well, how am I going to move back? I don't have that much money. You know, what do I do? And if I'm moving outside the city, right, in the country area or whatever she wants me to do, I need a car. And as a New Yorker living here for a decade, I didn't have a car. I never even bought a car before. And so that was going through my mind. And within a couple of weeks, it was like 2 weeks, I had a call that came to me randomly from some guy that said, and this is like my ignorance, I'm going to show you, but some guy that said, hi, my name is Johnny, I'm the, I don't know, global something, 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 marketing, blah, 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 vice president of the biggest beer distributor in the world. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And he's like, I said, well, what's that? He goes, it's called Anheuser-Busch, which I didn't drink Budweiser growing up. I don't know about beer very much, and I didn't know what Anheuser-Busch was. So I'm on this call, and he's like, so I heard about you from somebody, and I would love to hire you for a job for about a month. And I said, well, I don't have time for this. I don't know who you are and how, and I just felt like he was being a hotshot. I don't know who you are, but I don't have time. I'm about to move. I don't know how I'm going to move. I'm going to move, and there's no way that you're going to be able to pay for my what I really needed. So I hung up the phone, and my partner is in another room next to me, and he comes to the room and goes, were you on the phone with Anheuser-Busch? And I said, no. He said, who are you on the phone with? I said, I don't know, some Bush guy, some beer. And he goes, Anheuser-Busch? I said, yeah. Do you know them? He goes, gee, they're like the biggest beer distributor in the world. What did you tell them? I said, I told them I was busy packing. I got to move, you know? And he's like, wait. You just hung up with this guy that's maybe offering you a big job. I didn't even bother. I said, I have too much. I couldn't even see what the possibility was. And my partner looked at me and goes, you need to call that guy back and see what he wants. And so I called him back, and I said, I'm sorry for hanging up so abruptly. Let's talk about what you're looking for. And I gave him a number that was going to be able to start paying for my car, pay for my move, and give me some more money to be able to get a place and give me some extra spending money. And I've never done that. I didn't have the guts to do that, but I was like, if you're going to do it, let's do it. You know, let's see what this is really about. If this is what my teacher wants me to do, let's see if this is really how it's going to work. And so I threw out a number that was much bigger than I would ever considered, just looking at what I needed. And he said, fine, done. And I said, okay, but I need it soon, because when you work with corporate companies, if those of you have, the payment terms are very long. And I was like, I'm only in 30 days. I need the cash now. He's like, well, can I do it weekly? I said, okay. So he was paying me literally by PayPal on credit card. And he would exceed the amount so that he would have to pay me like 3 times a week, you know? And PayPal was calling me to make sure that I wasn't like funneling some weird drug money. Every week they were calling me like, these huge amounts were going through my bank account. To my PayPal account that was transferred to my account. And with that, I managed, it was a 30-day project, like he said. I worked, it was done, I moved, and I got here. And my life has changed drastically since then, in so many ways. My company has changed incredibly. The work I've done has changed so much. I found a partner that I've been friends with for a decade that I never even considered that being a possibility. And it was so much about my relationship with my teacher. I could only say that was the case because there was no one in my life that was giving me that kind of guidance, but also no one in my life that I could give that much renunciation to, you know? And it's not that I give renunciation to her. That's not what the Lama relationship is. It's that you have renunciation, but the teacher helps you move that forward. That's what they do. And that's the thing that I would definitely just take a look at, is that a lot of times people think that renunciation is to your teacher, that you give everything to your teacher. It's not like that. The renunciation is for you yourself. Your teacher guides you through that path and gives you opportunities to be able to do that for you. They're there to accelerate your practice in ways that you couldn't do otherwise, you know? So we're going to stop there. We're going to go through the 10 qualities next class. But I hope that was helpful, yeah, for all of you.
Did you ever pay it forward? Okay.
Yeah, I did. There's 2 people who actually help with retreats. Yeah, it's and you know, and just to say note too is that everyone's path to finding a teacher is unique. It doesn't look there. I've never heard 2 stories that sound alike at all, you know, and you know, like it's interesting. My story now sounds like when I say it, it sounds like very magical, but in the moment, I couldn't see it as being magical. I was so clouded with so much other crap in my life that it just didn't seem that way. And in honesty, I didn't even have the ability to see the magic in it when my teacher was talking to me. I almost just kind of took the things that came upon me because I was so desperate, because I didn't have anywhere else to go. You know, no one was helping me the way I needed that help. And for some reason, this woman, this teacher appeared in front of me where, for whatever reason, when I was in front of her, my heart would just melt. And I don't know why. And it was a strange thing. And I tested the melting too. I'd be like, oh, it was this year. And I'd go back again the next year. And then go back again the next year to see if it was consistent. And for whatever reason, every time I'm in her presence, something is very different for me. And so, you know, find your own voice and your own path and just be aware of how it looks. And sometimes teachers come to you and manifest in very different ways, but they're there if you want it as well. That's the other thing. There has to be a sense of, I would say absolutely a sense of renunciation needs to take place, but I think there does also need to be a sense of wanting it. And when I look back, I think it's like I wanted it, but I didn't want to be disappointed, you know? So I didn't want to vocalize how badly I wanted it, you know? It's like the pride in me. Anyway, okay.
Sangye Shindu Nite Ulargi Roku Nanda Shiva Shivarsho Yamuru Ramamanda Kanyatayami Devadi Devoku Siram Yeshe Sososhin Siram Yeshe Lejuwe
Thank you. I'm so sorry we ran late. I hate it when my teachers do it in the past. And Alan, just,
Thank you.
thank you so much. Thank you so much for saying.
Yes, yes.
Yes. So